All right. Today we're jumping into two of the most critical, high-stakes codes in all of behavioral health: crisis psychotherapy. Now, for you as a future coder, getting these right isn't just about a clean claim. Nope. It's about accurately capturing a moment of intense, urgent care for a patient. So, let's dive right in.
I mean, think about that for a second. When someone's life is literally on the line, how do we translate that intense moment of care into a code? Well, the answer lies in two very specific CPT codes, and we are going to break down exactly how, when, and why to use them.
Okay, first things first. Before we even look at the codes, we have to get crystal clear on what the CPT manual actually means by a crisis. Because let me tell you, it's not just a bad day. It's a very specific, very high-stakes clinical situation, and the documentation has to prove it.
Look at the keywords right here: urgent, life-threatening, highly complex, immediate intervention. These are not just fancy buzzwords, they are absolute documentation requirements. The clinical note has to paint this exact picture of severity to even justify thinking about a crisis code. We're talking about situations that need immediate safety planning and managing extreme distress, not your typical therapy session.
So now that we have a solid definition of what a crisis is, let's look at the tools you'll use to code for it. There are really two main codes that you've got to know inside and out. This is the power duo right here. Think of 9839 as your starting point, the main event. It covers that first critical block of time. Then you have 9840, which is like the overtime code. It's an add-on, and you only use it for additional time spent in that crisis. And here's the key. You can never, ever use the add-on code by itself. You've got to have the main event first.
Okay, if you remember one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. For crisis codes, it is all about time. Time is the single most important factor. It's what drives everything. So the big question is, how exactly do we count that time?
Let's break this down, because every point here is crucial. We're looking at the total face-to-face time for that whole day. And this is a big one. That time doesn't have to be all at once. A doctor could spend 20 minutes with a patient, step out to arrange a safe place for them, and then come back for another 40 minutes. You add all that time together. And during that time, the provider's focus is 100% on that patient, no multitasking.
All right, theory's great, but let's see how this stuff actually works in the real world. We're going to walk through a few common scenarios so you can see exactly how these time-based rules play out.
Okay, first up, a provider performs a totally legitimate, urgent, crisis-level intervention, but the total face-to-face time for the whole day adds up to only 25 minutes. How do you code that? The short answer? You can't. Not with a crisis code anyway. This is a hard and fast rule you absolutely have to remember. You need a minimum of 30 minutes to even think about using 90839. If it's less than that, even if it was a real crisis, you'll have to look at a different set of codes entirely.
Okay, next scenario. And this one happens all the time. The total face-to-face crisis intervention time is exactly 1 hour, 60 minutes. What's the code?
That's it, just one unit of 90839. Why? Because remember, that code covers the entire window from 30 minutes all the way up to 74 minutes. 60 minutes falls right smack in the middle of that range, so it's a perfect fit.
All right, now for a more complex one. Let's say a really severe crisis requires a lot of intervention, and the total time adds up to 110 minutes. How in the world do we capture all of that time?
So let's break this down. It's actually pretty simple. First, you report 9839. That takes care of the first 74 minutes. Then you just do the math. 110 total minutes minus the 74 you already coded leaves you with 36 minutes. And since 36 minutes is more than the 30-minute requirement for the add-on code, you report 1 unit of 9840. See? Simple as that.
Now, knowing when to use these codes is half the battle. Knowing when not to use them, well, that's just as crucial. There are certain code combinations that are totally forbidden, and getting this wrong leads to denials. So this is a really, really important section for any new coder. Okay, I really want you to pay close attention to this next part. These are the code combinations you absolutely must avoid when you're billing for crisis services on the same day.
So here's the main takeaway, the big why behind this rule. A crisis service is its own unique, standalone, super intensive event. You can't report it on the same day as a regular diagnostic evaluation or a standard therapy session because, well, the work of evaluating the patient and providing therapy is the crisis service. The crisis code basically absorbs and replaces those other codes for that day.
Whew, we've covered a ton of ground. So let's pull it all together into a really simple, practical checklist you can use every single time. This is how you build that bridge from the clinical story in the doctor's notes to the final code you put on the claim.
Before you even think about assigning 90839 or 90840, I want you to mentally scan the provider's note for these 4 things. 1. Does it actually describe a true crisis? 2. Is the exact time documented? 3. Does it say what the provider actually did? And 4. Does it confirm the patient was there? If any of these are missing, the documentation just doesn't support the code. Period.
And that really brings us to our last and maybe the most important question you need to ask. As a coder, you're the last line of defense. You're the final checkpoint. And your job is to make sure that the notes don't just list a bunch of facts, but that they truly, honestly paint a clear picture of a crisis intervention. Because behind every single code is a patient, and their story deserves to be told accurately.